Hello and welcome to this, the first in a new webinar series by Construction Wave called The Financial Chair. The premise is simple. We speak to leading finance professionals and construction experts about a variety of topics relating to money and the industry's relationship to it. My name is Rory Butler, editor of Construction Wave. Today, I am joined by Paul David Munnelly and Graham Fisk, Chief Executive Officer and Finance Director, respectively, of Construction and Infrastructure Support Services business Munnelly Group. Gents, welcome.
Thanks, Rory.
Paul, David, before we begin get into some of the questions today, perhaps you can just give us a brief overview of the business, how it got started, and its current areas of interest.
So, first of all, thanks for having us on. To go straight into it for Munnelly Group, we consist of 8 companies which work within the construction and infrastructure sectors, as you said. 20, 30, 40 years ago, that wouldn't have been the case. That would have been one company working for a period of time within a build of a project. But now, certainly over the last 10 years, we've diversified. So our involvement very much is in the pre-construction, pre-planning and feasibility of a project, right through to delivery, and then often being part of the operation of a live asset or a building. The services differ vastly, but they are all complementary of each other as well. The best way I can describe it, certainly within the delivery side, is if that you take a project, whether that's in building, road, rail, nuclear, and then if you turn it on its head and everything that tips out, things which aren't essentially fixed, that would be us. So we do a lot of the enabling works for tier 1 contractors and the other specialist contractors to be able to perform and deliver. There's lots of obviously lessons learned that we adapt and we bring forward into the pre-conception stage. But that's essentially what the Munnelly Group is today, and it's ever evolving. I'm sure if you ask me in a year's time, there'll be another string to our bow.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that overview. So, like you say, as a company, you're reasonably well diversified, construction, infrastructure, but also consulting and I believe recruitment as well. It's one of your. So how did the family, because you're a family-run or family-owned company, how did the family decide which sectors to specialize in? Was it an organic process or set in stone from the outset? And are there any other sectors, either established or new, that the group is interested in expanding into and exploring?
So it all started 45 years ago. The family lived in a community in North London, and there just simply weren't any jobs. It was an Irish community, and whilst construction was in the heritage and the blood of a lot of the families there just simply weren't jobs. So people were doing the milk rounds and everything like that. And then where we started was knowing that there wasn't many jobs or many opportunities, and being a part of community, we started to grow relationships. And from there, founder Phil Munnelly, who's also my dad, he studied quantity surveying, and he thought it was the right time to go at it alone and starting to put people to work. And that's essentially where it did start. It started with the community and the lack of jobs at the time, and from there it grew to be more packaged work, more specialist work, longer term work within the construction of buildings. Then we decided, well, if we are solely working for 1 or 2 companies within a subsector of construction, it carries a lot of risk. So then we felt that we should diversify. We should get in other areas, not just private sector, get involved in public sector, not just vertical buildings, get involved in infrastructure. So we attracted good talent. We started up smaller businesses in those fields, and then we acquired businesses along the way. And I don't know whether it was by default or by design, but after COVID, when um, high rises started to slow down within buildings, we were already diversified in road, rail, bridges, infrastructure. So that kind of helped where certain subsectors got slower and quieter, other sectors really grew. And we're seeing it now with the government investing in the public sector because we're positioned in a really good space. We see massive opportunity with that. Also, there are going to be challenges naturally, but by being diversified, it's kind of allowed it. So it has been conscious in many ways, but then it has also been organic. And, certainly at the beginning, it was a real mix of both. And we've just continued that mantra throughout our period of operating.
Great, thanks for that. Can you speak to perhaps some of the contractors that you're currently working with, and perhaps the ratio of public to private sector work that you currently do?
I'd say we're about 50-50. But equally, where we would mainly work for tier one contractors, we're speaking to councils and client direct. So that's really shifting as well. So some of our businesses work with the specialist contractors. So our client base 30, 40 years ago would look a certain way, but now it's a complete hybrid of all of that, which is great, as I said, because not only does it spread the risk, but you get so many great insights from working with other different types of companies and different types of people.
Yeah. Perhaps we'll just pivot to your recent promotion within the company. So, Paul, David, you've recently transitioned from Chief Operating Officer within Munnelly Group to Chief Exec, taking over from your dad, Phil, who has been in the job for 40 years. I imagine that's a big change. It'd be a big change for anybody. Can you speak to early days, obviously, but what's that been like? How did it come about? And what are some of the challenges and opportunities that you see as the new chief executive of Munnelly Group?
Yeah, so whilst it is fairly new, and me being in this role, I've been fortunate enough to have been involved in all parts of the business, as well as each of our 8 companies as well, whether that's involved in the acquisition or the startup or even sort of running the businesses themselves. So, Munnelly's and construction has been a huge part of my time within Munnelly Group, but also pretty much since I was born. So there is definitely a second nature element to it. So it has made the transition easier. However, that's not to downplay what the job is and what the future holds, because we have big ambitions. Construction as a sector will always have its challenges. The UK as an economy will always have its challenges. So, but providing we evolve and do things right and work with the right people and make the right decisions where we can, there's a huge opportunity for us. You asked before, where do I see us being positioned going? I think certainly construction infrastructure isn't just isolated within a perimeter of a project or behind the hoarding. It seeps out over that to ensure that it doesn't impact the environment or even people going from their place of rest to work. So I see that being a big part of it now. Construction isn't just walking through a turnstile or through a gate. It starts a lot earlier in there in the experience. So I think that's going to be a big focus for us. And yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited what the future holds. And yeah, the role is a big one, and the company is sizable. But I see that challenge, that something that I'm keen to push forward with.
Yeah. We'll perhaps come back to, I like your observation there about approaches to construction and attitudes beginning well before actually getting on site, and we'll come back to Munnelly's approach to that a little bit later. But I'd like to bring Graham in at this point, if that's all right. So Graham, you're the finance director. Can you just speak to how long have you been with the business? And as I understand it, you're coming from a more developer background, specifically Taylor Wimpey.
That's right.
How does your role within a construction firm now compare to that of a developer? And as this is a financial chair series, speaking to our fellow finance director listeners, how have you adjusted your methods as a finance director?
Okay, I can answer that. Thank you, Rory. That's a great question to kick off with from the finance side. You're right. My background, 7 years with Taylor Wimpey, immediately prior to joining Munnelly, but I go a lot further back outside of construction, and a long finance career, obviously, but with big focus in finance, in retail and distribution in particular. So I've got a number of sectors experience to draw on. And you're right, traditionally in construction, the role of an FD has been much more hands-on in operational finance, I guess, focused on cost control, cash flow management, and sourcing financing. Whereas in a developer, my time was probably a little bit more strategic and focused on financial growth, overseeing everything from the acquisition of a piece of land all the way through to delivering the houses that they were building and the property sales at the end of the process. And I guess whilst I've been drawn back into some of those more operational day-to-day aspects of finance here, which I obviously have experience of from further back in my career, I haven't necessarily needed to adjust a great deal, because I think in order to survive, constructors or the construction industry has had to learn, or is beginning to learn, that it needs to be more strategic, and there's a role for the finance director to play in that. We've seen a lot of companies go into administration and disappear over the last 18 months, 2 years or so. So I think it's important that the finance guys step up to the plate, and they've got something to deliver there. So bringing some of that strategic background with me has been useful. And a great example of that is probably through our annual budget process this year. For the first time, we asked our MDs of our individual businesses to look a little bit further out into what years 2 and 3 might look like for the first time, and that posed some interesting questions and got a bit of thought process going about what they needed to be doing to deliver longer term and make sure that the building blocks are in place to deliver not just the current year, but beyond that. So it's been a learning curve for all of us, I think.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you may or may not be aware, but recently we published an article off the back of an interview with Melly Dumas, who is the FD, or rather Chief Financial Officer, at Skanska. And she mentioned when talking about her strategy as a finance director, and I was asking about the role of a finance director and a finance professional in a modern day construction company, and how they turn up on what she feels a modern day finance director in a construction company should be doing. Similar approach, saying that they were also looking at a 3-year strategy. They also went to the heads of each of their department, and they wanted. She thinks that her position is that you can only really come up with a coherent financial strategy over at least the near term by immersing yourself in the other departments, understanding commercially and operationally what their aspirations are, yes, and then building a strategy off the back of that. Would you say that's quite commonplace, or is
I think it's becoming more commonplace. I saw that interview, and obviously the CFO summit, so I concur and agree with pretty much everything she was saying. I think you're right. The role of finance needs to be to get involved with other departments. There's no way that we can drive the business by sitting behind our spreadsheets like we used to, and just sitting there and adding up the money. It is about being involved with our individual businesses, and I encourage all of my finance team here to be involved with the individual MDs of the businesses that they work with, to make sure they're challenging and probing where necessary. So it has to be that collaborative approach, I think, to take the business forward. Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. So with that in mind, there's a question for both of you. I don't think the answers are going to be necessarily surprising to some of the listeners, but with Paul David now at the helm, and talking about building a financial strategy, when you look at the construction industry now, what are the key trends and or events that you're watching very closely? What are the challenges and opportunities there? What do they present for Munnelly Group as a business?
Right, I'll jump in for the first one because it's what everyone's talking about right now, and it's Gateway 2. I think it's great that the government's come out and dedicated, spend and put quotas for number of houses being built and essentially loosened a bit of red tape on planning, which is really, really great. But it's Gateway 2, certainly for the high rises, is where I think there's going to be a lot more focus, or there's a lot of concern, I'd say, about that. Not necessarily the requirement for it, because everyone for sure believes in that. It's just ensuring that that process is seamless and can be, construction works at speed. So ensuring that those projects and regenerations can sort of go through the process. So I think that's a big one. So that's definitely going to, certainly what's on the radar now, but it's going to be one to watch over the next 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
The second is public sector spend, obviously. Houses need to be built, infrastructure needs to be built, ensuring that happens. The public spending review, obviously, has come out and it's fairly positive as well. So that'll be a big thing to watch. And then finally, I think it's around ensuring that companies are financially strong, so that the company that starts the project is the one that finishes it.
Mm.
Because more often than not, it's actually happening a lot more now, that necessarily wasn't a prerequisite for package work or winning works, but now it is, and rightfully so, it should be. And obviously, as Graham alluded to, over the last 18 months to 2 years, we're seeing some fairly big players going into administration, and potentially with Gateway 2, there's going to be companies that aren't necessarily able to build at the moment. So it's just showing that there's that financial strength, but also resilience, I'd say, would be a big trend.
Graham, sounds like that's your cue, I think.
I'd concur with most of that, if I'm honest. I think government-backed investment in infrastructure and energy in particular is an opportunity clearly for us, and one that we're keeping a close eye on. And the announcements and in the press this week and over previous weeks, obviously all relevant to that. I'd probably just temper that a little bit. The excitement of the opportunity, I suppose, with the concerns about the age-old industry problem around labour.
Yeah.
And obviously the success of government-led training or government-backed training schemes, I suppose, is probably paramount to those being able to be delivered. So obviously keep an eye on that. And then hand in hand with that is obviously immigration reforms. If they're successful, that needs to be part of it to make sure they're delivered. So they're probably the big two. I concur absolutely with that. And then, of course, I think inflation is still an issue for us. As it is for most companies. I think that's one, as a good FD, obviously, we absolutely need to keep an eye on inflation and interest rates and what they're doing day to day, and the ability of companies to be able to source funds to keep projects going, which is what that's all about, really.
Yeah, I don't know how sort of definitively you can speak to this, but lots of moving parts there. Some of it requires not just near-term planning, but a lot of long-term planning with regards to capital, resource, labour allocation, all of those sorts of things. As an FD, how do you begin to sort of strategize for that over the course of 6 months to a year?
Wow, that's a question. I mean, it all comes back to an FD's favourite subject, which is cash. I guess cash is
Yeah.
king, and we're very fortunate we're in a very strong position cash-wise currently, and it's not a major concern. I know that in the past, Munnelly has had to source external financing, etc., and we're probably not in that position at the moment, unless we choose to be. Obviously, if we wanted to be acquisitive or invest in other areas, then that would be our decision to do. So we are in control of that. Yeah, you're right. Looking further out is part of the jigsaw here, and that's probably why I was encouraging the individual company MDs of the Munnelly Group to forecast out beyond 1 year when we did the annual budget process this year, because I need to see what's coming down the track. If they've got a particular revenue stream they want to drive, I need to know that we've got the cash to be able to finance that if that's what's needed. So it is about longer term, looking out beyond, probably not just the next 3 to 6 months, but beyond that, and seeing what's coming around the corner. It's a fine balancing act, absolutely. So there's no easy answer to that, I don't think.
No, not at all. And as you say, it's cash is king in construction. And
absolutely, yes.
Okay, thanks for that, gents. We'll move on a little bit. We'll move on. I'm just curious about how. So, in construction, as we all know, everybody knows, it's an industry that's renowned for quite narrow margins against, as you've illustrated, oftentimes huge financial risk. And then you've got rampant contractor insolvency, Graham, as you said, labour shortages, price volatility, ageing workforce, and so on. And frankly, an appalling mental health support as well. So how does Munnelly measure business success? Is it employee satisfaction, retention, ESG and social value, turnover?
I mean, I'd say all of the above. So it'd be hard or unfair to put any of those above the others. But I think if we were to loop back to the financial piece, by having strong financial footing, it allows us invest in our people and technology, which can kind of ensure that we are attracting the right talent, but also retaining them. So employee retention is massively important to us. Once again, by having a strong financial footing, we can then improve service and performance. So that in that sense. But as Graham has alluded to, it comes down to cash, and cash being king. So by not having to borrow at all, unless we want to, it helps, and it ensures that we don't have those sleepless nights, and we can use our money the right way and go into contract with the right people and clients should we want to. Also helps us, during those turbulent times by having strong cash reserves. So I would say, yeah, I'd say they're all important. Employee satisfaction, ESG, client retention, service, but I do think it does come down to ensuring that we are operating properly, both financially and our general performance as well.
Great.
I'd echo most of that, if I'm honest. I think you're absolutely spot on, PD. It is a suite of metrics that we would look at. Gross and net margins are absolutely key, but it's just one of a number of things that we look at. If you look at the success of the business, it's more than just winning contracts. It's about those projects. It's about having financial resilience. It's about our reputation as well. And if I was joining a company new from outside, as I obviously did recently with Munnelly, there's probably 3 things I'd probably look at to start with, which probably covers all of those. One is obviously margin, as you mentioned. I want to know what margins the company's making. Cash, absolutely. I'd look at the cash position of the company, but I'd also look at if I could get access to it, the employee turnover and employee retention, because I think the employees probably tell you more about a company. The companies, if they're staying, it's a good company. If they're voting with their feet and moving on, you probably know there's some issues there. So I think employee retention is a key measure.
Yeah, Great. Graham, can we just stick with you? I know we've kind of touched on this a little bit already, but I just want to come back to the role of the finance professional in construction. And you were talking there about what you look for when you're joining a company.
Yeah.
It's fundamentals. Again, I'm just curious, how has the role of the construction finance director or the finance professional, in your case, changed during your career? And how do you think finance directors should show up in the eyes of their colleagues in a modern contractor business beyond the kind of day-to-day fiduciary duties?
I mean, you're absolutely right. It's not enough just to have technical and managerial skills anymore, as it probably was certainly when I started out well over 30 years ago, probably pushing 40 years ago, in finance, when finance was very much a back office function. And I think it has evolved to the point where it's much more forefront, and therefore a finance director and actually any senior finance professional needs to think about their own branding and their own behaviours, not just their technical skills and their managerial skills. As I said earlier, it's important for them to be connected across the organisation and to understand the business operationally and commercially to be able to deliver to that. Therefore, in terms of showing up, I mean, I almost hesitate to use the word business partnering because it's almost become a little bit overused and cliched, but certainly I'd expect the finance director to exist as a co-pilot to the CEO, being able to deputise if necessary and being able to challenge and probe and positively disrupt, I suppose, some of the thinking in a what's the word? Empathetic. Get the word out. Empathetic manner. The way the business works, and I think that's much more the role of the finance director now than what it was before. Obviously, all that exciting stuff like statutory accounts, insurance, tax still exists and still is hand in hand with the role. But I think it's grown well beyond that now, which makes it a much more exciting role to be part of, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think we tend to agree. It's certainly why Construction Wave is interested in the role of not just finance persons in construction, but finance and construction as a subject. It's really fascinating, and it's also born out of this long-term observation, at least from our perspective, that the role of the construction finance professional or the finance director has changed so much that, as you say, it's no longer the kind of no disrespect, it's not a back office role anymore. In fact, the FD is often kind of seen as one of the kind of main players in the kind of cast of characters in construction. Yeah, and as you say, it's setting an example and immersing oneself in the operations and commercial aspects of each department. And yeah, great. Munnelly Group has obviously grown and changed a lot. It's well diversified, Paul David, as you've outlined at the outset there. And you've recently relocated. Can you just speak to where the company has first of all been up until now, and for how long, and what's prompted the move out to Hertfordshire, I believe? Yep. What's the strategy behind it? How do you think it will benefit the business in the long term?
Yeah, so we're fresh off the back of an office move. We were in Harrow for 40 odd years at 4 to 5 different locations, and I actually drove around to each of them the other day, starting at sort of a front room of a house and then moving up and up and up. And we kind of got to the point where we owned a fairly large office in Harrow. For a while now, we knew that we needed to invest in our office space, right? Because we are the office space has changed. It changed dramatically in the last 4 years, and an office space isn't necessarily sitting at your desk behind a screen. An office space had to be more of a collaborative space. It actually needs to be more of a extension of working from home, really. So all the benefits get from working from home, where you can step outside and go for a walk, or have a nice bit of food and lunch. The office space is competing against that, right? So we knew that we needed to invest in our office. So at the time, we thought, right, before we make that decision, let's see what else is out there. So we went on a journey to see what else was out there in the area and wider. Um, and it was really hard to ultimately make that decision that we're going to move out of Harrow. But where we've moved to, the benefits outweigh staying in Harrow. And I'm not just talking about the benefits within the building, but the peripheral benefits. So, being able to walk along the canal, or go to a cafe, or even sit in a pub garden after work. It was just it had more than what was to offer at the time. So we went through that process. We actually owned the building as well, so it did have a mortgage, and it allowed us to have a mortgage as well. So that was an added benefit. But we didn't need to sell, and we were prepared to invest in Harrow. But once we did that project, we felt that actually Kings Langley was the right space. It was the right place to be in. And then we went on the journey of fitting out the office to make it a really vibrant, energetic, cool place to work, which hopefully it is. I'm biased in saying, but I feel like it is. And now that's not a slight on Harrow at all. We grew up in the area, sort of personally and professionally, and it was really bittersweet. But what this new office will do for us and the location is it will allow us to, create better relationships, greater collaboration with our people. And we're already starting to see that as well. We spend a lot of time with the people that we work with. So we want to make that time as best served as possible, so that actually people enjoy coming to the work, people enjoy going to the office. So that we've hopefully done. I mean, it's early days, but I'm positive about it.
That's great. No, as you said, they're both great areas. Both have their own merits. One of my first reporting roles was actually covering Harrow, so I know the area quite well. And I also was a reporter in Hertfordshire for a while, so I'm familiar with both areas. And they both have their benefits and great stories.
Great.
Just sticking with you, Paul. Wrapping up now, getting towards the end of this first financial chair episode. As we said, you've recently taken over the role of CEO from your dad, Phil, and that brings with it new pressures and challenges, both professionally and I'm sure personally in some ways. But just to sort of cap off, are there any lessons that you've learned from your dad in leading a construction business, because he was in the job for a long time, and perhaps there's a particular memory working alongside him that you can recall that kind of illustrates that nicely?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a whole load of lessons, right? Not even working in the group, but sort of being around Phil, my dad, for a long, long time. But I'd say the top three would be: number one, be resilient. There'll always be challenges, so you have to kind of be resilient to those, but also be resilient in business as well. Build the resilience into the company. I think that's really important. Number two is constantly innovate. Construction in the past has been behind in innovation, but actually there is some great innovations to come out of construction. So constantly innovate, because that allows you to evolve. And then finally, just keep on pushing forward, because if you're not moving forward, just staying still, well, in fact, you're probably going backwards. So you have to keep on pushing the boundaries, keep on pushing forward, for construction and for the business. In regards to fondest memories, there have been also a lot. I think the main takeaway I would say is that, my dad Phil took me out with him a lot of the time when he was meeting clients, and socializing or having meetings or event days. And I think being personable is really important, being transparent is important, and building those relationships. He's someone who's excellent at it, and there are lots of people in our group who are also really, really good at it as well. But what that allows you to do is you build trust. You build trust internally, but you also build trust externally. You become trusted. So that actually the people that we work with and the people that we work for aren't afraid to pick up the phone. We don't want to lose that. As the world becomes digital, we don't want to lose that ability to pick up the phone and speak, and talk things through, because often a lot can be resolved there. So I would say it's definitely lessons learned, and definitely the fondest memory is just being out amongst it from a really, really young age. And I think that's allowed me to get to know lots of people and to pick up those qualities myself.
Great. Well, congratulations. I know you've been in the job a few weeks now, but congratulations on your new role.
Thank you.
I think perhaps just to cap things off, we can just spend a moment now here remembering Andy Rhodes. And you knew the man much better than I did or we did, but who Andy sadly passed away last week. And I know the company has issued a statement, but for those of you that don't know, Andy joined Munnelly Support Services in April, I believe, as an MD. He previously spent about 3 years as an operations director for Mace. So, and our condolences are with his family, friends, and of course his former colleagues at this sad time. But, PD, is there anything you'd like to say about Andy?
Yeah, so I'd known Andy for a while. He was very known in industry. I would even say he was one of the top construction logistics leaders in the industry. Really personable, and whilst he hadn't been with the company for very long, it was quite a long time sort of in the making. So it's really shocking. It's obviously very saddening, and the response to the statement just shows how much of a great guy he was in all the circles he operated in. Obviously ex-military, in construction, and then just in more of his personal circles. So yeah, I think we want to, and we are going to do a couple of things in memory of Andy, but I do appreciate time to speak about it and to honor him, because I think it's the right thing to do.
Absolutely. Yeah, sadly missed. And again, our thoughts are with his family and friends. Gents, that's it. Thanks for being the first guests to appear on the Financial Chair series. Much appreciated. We'll be watching the activities of Munnelly Group in the coming years, and wish you lots of luck for the future. Just a heads up, our next guest on the Financial Chair series will be Rob Driscoll, who is Director of Legal and Business at the Electrical Contractors Association. And he'll be talking to me about retention payments in construction, which should be an interesting conversation. So please keep an eye out for that coming out very soon. Yeah, thanks, guys. All the best.
Thanks, Rory. And
Thank you, Rory.
I love everything that Construction Wave is doing. So if anyone sees or hears this, make sure to follow them on all their channels.
That's very kind. Thanks, PD.
Cheers, guys.
Thank you.